All right, chapter 13 is about the cost of production. There's more graphing and it gets complicated again in this chapter. The last chapter have been thinking chapters. This is a doing chapter. Okay, your Ford Motor Company. Give me three costs.
Tire.
So inputs,
Labor.
input.
Dang.
So we'll call it materials, we'll call it labor,
Taxes.
Rent.
taxes. Okay? What three different business decisions do you make that are affected by your costs? We listed our costs as labor, materials, and taxes.
How much you produce?
How much do we produce?
How much you sell for?
What price do we sell it at? Where do we sell it? Do we export it? Okay? All right. So, we're going to define production function. This is not like conjunction junction or whatever. What's marginal product and how are they related? If you're going to sit for the AP exam, marginal products will be everywhere. What are the various costs and how are they related to each other and to output? How are costs different in the long run versus short run? And here we start the LR and SR part of economics. And your graphs just instantaneously with LR and SR got exponentially more complex. What are economies of scale? Okay. We assume that a firm's goal is to maximize profit. Common sense, right? Why would a firm leave money on the table? Okay? Profit equals total revenue minus total cost. Total revenue is the amount that a firm receives from the sale of its output. Total cost is the market value of the inputs a firm uses to produce its output. Pretty common sense. Okay. So there are explicit and implicit costs in economics. Explicit costs are the ones where you're writing a check, you're laying out money, you're transmitting your Bitcoin.
Do you have Bitcoin?
So
I don't deal in speculation.
I should invest.
Implicit costs don't cost money, but they exist. The owner's time is an implicit cost. Jared's our go-to example as a small business owner. Jared, did you get paid to winterize your equipment? Sure, you changed your oil, drained the gas, filled the engine was stable, prepped it all, sharpened your blades, restringed the trimmers. You didn't get paid for that? So what kind of cost would that be? That would be an implicit cost. None of your homes gave you a bonus for doing that stuff so that you'd be able to do their work next year? It's a ripoff.
Yeah.
All right. So the cost of something is what you give up to get it. We know this as opportunity cost. Okay. Opportunity cost exists whether the costs are implicit or explicit, and both matter in decision making. Both matter.
Repeat that sentence.
Both implicit and explicit costs are part of firms' decision making determinations, and both matter. Okay, an example. You need $100,000 to start your business. It's a bargain business, apparently. The interest rate is 5%. So we're going to assume that you're going to borrow this $100,000. You haven't saved it up during your lucrative high school and junior high babysitting careers. Okay, case one, you can borrow $100,000. It's going to cost you $5,000 interest. Yeah, that's the way interest works. Okay. By the way, the interest would actually be much higher than that because interest is compounded, but we're keeping life simple here, okay? Case two, use $40,000 of your savings. You were good little savers. Apparently you saved all of your birthday and tooth fairy money and everything. And you borrow the other $60,000. So the explicit cost is the $3,000 interest on the $60,000 loan. But the implicit cost is the interest that you could have earned on your savings. Total cost is equal. But you can't leave out the implicit cost and say, oh, it's better for me to only borrow 60,000 because then it's only costing me 3,000 because it's still costing you 5,000. Got it?
Wait, but does that happen where your interest on your
No, in reality, you would pay more interest than you would earn.
So in reality, would it be smarter to use more of your savings
Yes.
and then loan it?
Yes. Okay. There are two kinds of profit. Try not to let your heads explode. I don't have time to clean up brains today. Okay? There's economic profit and accounting profit. No throwing up either. Accounting profit is total revenue minus explicit costs, because accountants can only deal in tangible money. You have to have paid money out for an accountant to deal with it. Just think of it in those terms. If money didn't exchange hands, an accountant can't consider it. Their brains just aren't that complex.
Wait, on paper, like change hands or like?
Whether it's an electronic transmission of money, if money did not change hands,
Okay.
an accountant just can't comprehend
So
it.
it doesn't take opportunity.
Right.
Okay, I don't mean to throw you for the loop. Like, what if you buy on?
What?
Like, what if you buy on account?
So you're still exchanging money in one form or another.
Like, at some point in time.
Yes. If money wasn't exchanged, an accountant can't deal with it. They just can't comprehend implicit costs.
Trust me, I can't.
Economic profit takes into account implicit costs, those things that aren't measured in dollars spent. So an accountant is never going to let Jared deduct his time winterizing as a business expense because there was no money spent. There's no receipt. He can't write it off. But an economist is going, dude, I feel ya. I get that implicit cost. I understand how that cut into your profit. And I think you'd have a hard time finding an economist who would call you dude.
Mark's brother.
Okay. Accounting profit, because it ignores implicit cost, is always going to be higher than economic profit. So in real world terms, economic profit is more real because it takes total cost into account. Practice time!
Yeah. That's more like it. There we go.
It's been
Fake it till you make it. The equilibrium rent on office space has just gone up $500 a month. Ouch. I'm moving out. So let's determine the effects on accounting profit and economic profit if you're at your own office space, you own your own office space, the rent on office space goes up $500 a month. You rent your office space. What's the impact on accounting profit? It decreases by $500 a month. What's the impact on economic profit? Are there implicit costs associated with that price increase?
yeah.
You have to work more to
You don't have money to spend elsewhere.
Like, you have to cut it from something.
Interesting. All right.
If you like barely making by, like barely
Yeah.
scraping by,
Nope.
you're screwed.
What implicitly would it be costing you? It only costs you money when the price goes up and you rent. Now, if you decided to look for another place to rent and found a place where the rent was only $300 more than yours had been, then you could account for the implicit cost of the time it took making phone calls and surfing the internet looking for another place.
And would that be worth $200?
That depends. That depends. If it's more than $200, then you should just stay where you are.
Yeah.
Right? But as long as you just stay where you are, economic costs and accounting costs end up being the same. There's no added implicit cost for staying put. Then you also have to count the cost of the moving time and packing and then unpacking.
Well, the cost to look for that place that could be a little bit cheaper is over $200. It would still be beneficial if you look at like a year.
Long run,
That's what I'm working on. Not
Yeah.
just 1 month.
fair enough. Fair enough. Even when you count in moving costs and packing and unpacking and yeah. All right.
Remote not working?
Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. All right, whoa. All right, when you own your own office space, this is tough. Hey! When you own your own office space, explicit costs still haven't changed. It's still an increase of $500 a month. But your implicit costs go up.
You could be renting it out.
You own your own space. You don't raise your rent on yourself, right? Just because other people's rent went up, you're not going to raise your rent. So your accounting costs don't change at all. But your implicit costs do. Because you could be renting it to someone else and making an extra $500 a month. Yes. Why they don't sell them, why they just build another one and move it and then rent the one they have. Yeah.
That's smart.
If your total cost of your mortgage payment and insurance and a little money for maintenance and upkeep is less than the market value of rent for the house, it makes perfect sense to rent it if you're willing to absorb the implicit costs associated with managing a rental property, which are not insignificant. To keep it up, to take the 2 a.m. call when the furnace goes out on a 20 degree below night, or to get called away from work when the air conditioner went out on a 110 degree day, when a little kid put a spoon down the disposal and now the pipes are burst, or whatever. There are a lot of implicit costs associated with it. So you need to make a fair amount of profit, and accounting profit, not just economic profit. Yes, sir. All right, so math time. Production function shows the relationship between the quantity of inputs and the quantity of output. Seems straightforward enough, doesn't it? And I will confess that this part of this chapter always manages to confuse me a little bit once somebody asks a question. So I'm upfront about that. We can represent this production function in a table, an equation, or a graph. We have a farmer who grows wheat. Farmer Jack grows wheat on 5 acres of land. And he can hire as many workers as he wants. By the way, in this day and age, Farmer Jack would be bankrupt if all he had was 5 acres of land. All right, but keeping it nice and simple. So L is what?
Number of workers.
What does L stand for? Labor. Q is quantity. Bushels of wheat. Okay. So we have the quantity of output relative to the quantity of labor. If Jack hires no workers, he has no wheat. Apparently Jack cannot farm for himself. He had polio as a child. He just can't physically do it. Okay. Hires one worker and he gets 1,000 bushels of wheat. Can you see where this is going?
That was weird.
Gavin, are you cheating? Are you looking at the answers on your phone?
Oh, he's texting his girlfriend to try and get her to come home.
If he hires 2 workers, he gets 1,800 bushels of wheat. Ask the question,
Why didn't it go?
why isn't it linear? Why didn't he get an extra 1,000 bushels of wheat? Is that what you're asking?
Oh, because it costs more.
That's a good question.
Well, one of the workers should be
Ah, maybe one worker isn't as good as the other.
Maybe it's like me and David's working, one of us is
Maybe
good.
there's too many foods in
Wait.
Oh, whatever, whatever.
So if
Feel
you,
better.
if you hire a second worker, you can't hire as much seeds, you don't have that much wheat maybe?
No, it's not about not being able to get the other inputs. The only input we're considering is labor. He hires a 3rd worker. Uh-oh, this is getting bad. Why is he wasting his time hiring that guy? When the first one got him 1,000 bushels and the third guy's only getting him 600 more. This is a ripoff. What's Jack thinking?
Still more.
What's your question?
So the first one produces 1,000. The second, the 2 combined then produce 900 apiece, and then it's 800 apiece. So
Oh, so you're assuming that the second worker makes the first worker
Work
less
less.
productive.
because
Are they BFFs?
Oh.
so would the next one be 7
They
for
always talking.
So then, when the third
2,800?
worker's hired, their productivity apiece is 800 bushels, rather than the third worker being 2/3 less productive or 2/5 less productive.
7 for 2,800. Ripped up 4.
Oh! That was awesome.
Dang, so
Uh-oh, things got really ugly there at the end, didn't they?
they're getting real.
So when we make it a graph, just look and think on this. All right. So when Jack hires one more worker, his output goes up by the marginal product of labor. Marginal product is the change. I'll let you just blindly copy that down before I explain what it means.
Are you being sarcastic or do you actually want this?
No, but I know people will continue to blindly copy it down.
What's he saying about
Marginal product is the change brought on by one additional unit. Marginal product is the change brought on by one additional unit. Like marginal taxation is the tax brought on by that one extra dollar earned. Marginal product is the change brought on by that one extra person. So the marginal product for Jack from the first worker to the second worker is 800 bushels. Okay. It's the input arising, or it's the output arising from additional unit of input. Yes, sir.
Can you repeat like the?
It's right there. Marginal product is the input, is the output you get from one additional unit of input.
So unit could be people or money.
If we were talking about, if we're talking about capital goods instead of labor as the input, it's the additional output you get from one extra combine.
Okay.
It's the additional output you get from one extra acre. It's the additional output you get from one extra application of herbicide. Yeah, you can do it from any one extra whatever, but it's one extra input produces you a marginal increase in output.
And that's
Does that relate to like compound interest?
Say again?
Does that relate to compound interest?
No, that does not relate to compound interest.
so your marginal production it can be positive or negative.
Yes, it is actually possible to increase your inputs and decrease your outputs.
And if you over pesticide a field and you just kill everything.
Yes, yes. You can actually hire so many workers that your productivity declines as well.
Or like
Have you ever heard the phrase "too many cooks in the kitchen"?
Oh, my
Supposed to Yeah, depending upon the size of your kitchen, one too many people in there makes it chaos. Somebody's gonna get stabbed or gets boiled water spilled because it's just too much. Yeah, you can do that to yourself in business as well.
That sort of happens in my job. They'll have like 5 people there at a time, and we're moving really slowly, at least when no one does anything. 'Cause there's nothing to do.
And because you're expecting somebody else to do it.
Yeah.
All right, Delta, our old friend Delta's back.
Yes.
So the change in change in quantity equals the change in output. The change in L is the change in labor. Okay. You're not graphing anything. This is just the statement. Change in quantity is the change in output. Change in L is the change in labor. Okay. So the equation is change in quantity over change in labor. Change in quantity over change in labor. MPL, marginal product of labor. So could we do marginal product of technology?
Yes.
Could we do marginal product of land? Of resources? Yeah. All right. So now we can do some math here and calculate the total marginal product, or the marginal product. Okay. So, the change in labor, and guys, you write these in between the lines. So if you were making this table and you were a very linear person, I would skip a line on your paper. So you have an empty line in between. If you can handle it, you can write on every line, and then this one goes actually on the line in between. Okay? Make it work for you. So the change from 0 to 1, the change in labor is 1. And the change in bushels of wheat is 1,000. So 1,000 divided by 1 is 1,000. The change in labor here is
1,
the change in quantity is
800,
800 divided by
1,
is
800.
That's terrible.
We're math geniuses. 600. 400.
Why did you say stop hiring people, Gavin? I'm still getting more.
Yeah, but you're also like paying them, so you're actually like losing money.
Oh, are you assuming that I'm paying them all equally?
Yes.
Maybe I am, maybe I'm not.
And we don't know
If you
how
are,
much,
if you
we
are
don't
a
know
smart
how
business
much those
person,
bushels
you are
will be
paying them
earning.
as minimal as possible.
Yes, sir.
So if they hired one more person, they wouldn't make any more money, correct?
Theoretically, if we follow this trend, the sixth person is going to be producing 0, and we would still get 3,000 bushels of wheat. Yeah. So what is our total marginal product, boys and girls?
3,000
And how do you get that?
addition.
By adding up all the marginal products or looking at the total output for the fifth person. All right. So, yes, Q.
Why does hiring another person decrease incentive of work?
Why does hiring another person decrease the incentive of work?
Is it so
One guy was working 5 acres. 5 guys working 5 acres. Does the first guy have to work as hard as he did when he was working when he was working the 5 acres alone?
Can you go back
So, so is it that we,
Hey, Aiden's question.
is it that we're like, they're losing their, I don't know how to say it, but is the 3,000 the max that we can get out of that 5-acre field?
In this scenario, yeah, you can assume that that's as productive as that land's going to be.
So then that one guy wasn't getting to the full 5 acres.
Probably not. Probably not possible for him.
It still doesn't-
All right. The marginal product of labor equals the slope of the production function. MPL diminishes as labor increases. So you were able to find it? Good. Are you glad you went back and asked?
Yeah.
Don't be cowardly. All right. So this explains why the production function gets flatter as labor increases. And you've seen that graph already. It went, it died at the top.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is there such a thing as an equilibrium in this graph situation?
Well, to have an equilibrium, something would have to be crossing it.
Will there ever be a cross?
All right. So you can see the slope. Yes?
Yes.
See slope decrease. So why does this matter? Why does this matter at all? Because we know this, rational people think at the margin. They think, is it worth hiring that one extra worker? What would your answer be to hiring the second laborer?
Yes.
To the third? Fourth?
No.
Fifth?
No.
You're still making getting
You have to find out how much
You're
you're
still making more.
hire the same.
Would you hire the sixth?
No.
If your expenses
All right. So, when Farmer Jack hires an extra worker, his costs go up by the wage he pays the worker. What kind of cost is that? It's an explicit cost.
an account.
And his output goes up by the MPL. Comparing the two helps Jack decide whether or not it's worth it. Okay. So, you've been asking this question. Why does his MPL go down the more workers he gets? Each worker has less land to work with. By the time we have 5 workers on 5 acres, each worker's only working 1 acre of land. So maybe 1 acre of land is only capable of producing 600 bushels. No matter what, as long as you have a fixed input, a factory that is X number of square feet, or X numbers of robots in your factory, or X numbers of workstations in your accounting firm, as long as one of your inputs is fixed, your MPL is always going to go down as you continue to add labor. For instance, if I want to dig a pool in my backyard, and I hire Kirby to come over and dig, and I give him a shovel.
Bad back.
He's gonna dig, he's gonna dig, and he's gonna dig, and he's gonna dig, and he's gonna be pretty productive. And I hire Hayden to come over, and I give him a shovel,
Solid. It's fun.
and my pool's getting bigger. And now I hire Q to come over, and my pool doesn't get much bigger. Because I only have 2 shovels. Right? So I have a fixed input. And hiring more labor beyond the capacity of that input to deal with the labor doesn't help me. Jared, do you have employees? So you have 1 mower, 1 trimmer.
I'm your Rebbe.
Why don't you have any employees to work the other mower?
Well, I've hired people to help me out sometimes, but they're not really employees.
Really?
Oh, you make them be contract
You use
workers so you don't have to have
contracts now,
liability
yeah.
insurance. Smart guy. Smart guy. All right. But, so let's say Jared has 2 mowers. He hires 1 guy to help him out. Is he going to hire another one?
No.
He could, because the 3rd guy couldn't trim. Would he hire a 4th?
No.
Probably not. Maybe that guy could blow off the sidewalks.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Make it
All right. But you understand the concept of why it diminishes, because you still have a fixed input. Right? If every time Farmer Jack hired another worker, he bought another acre of land, we wouldn't see the curve get quite so flat. Yes?
Okay, so I understand kind of like the labor decreases, but so you have 1 guy doing output, say he's making how many bushels on that piece of land, but if you hire a second one, and you just like divide that land in half and give each one they work, and they're still each like both productive, like equal, so then once they just reach how much that land can yield, does it just stop? Like why does their productivity go down?
They have to use the same equipment.
So you're saying if the first guy could get 1,000 bushels out of the land, why didn't we get 3,000 bushels out of 3 guys?
Wasn't it natural to have like equilibrium where everybody produces about the same?
Yeah.
Because they don't like, why would I work so much harder?
Yeah.
If depending on like the wage, incentivizes them to work harder or not. If they get paid the same wage, like, what's the matter?
Because at heart, we're all a little socialistic. You guys have been on teams before, and there's always that one slacker at practice, and everybody looks at that guy, and if the coach isn't yelling at him, what do you start doing a little?
Yelling at him.
Or slacking a little on your own, right? Have you heard the phrase lowest common denominator used in a practice like that? You're only as strong as your,
I heard that one.
and so that's where communism fails, is because what's the incentive to work harder? As long as the guy who isn't working as hard as you are is getting paid the same, or what you assume is near the same, and isn't getting disciplined for it, what do you start doing?
Not doing it.
Oh,
Can I like get rid of like all this knowledge?
oh, output incentives.
That's what I was gonna say, is like commission.
Possibly.
Like it's this guy.
Possibly, but let me ask you a question. What happens when a hailstorm hits and the crop is destroyed? Do you pay them something?
I guess they.
You
yeah.
lay them off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry guys.
But what if
Sorry,
someone-
your kids can't eat.
what if
But what if-
someone-
what if
Sorry, your children are gonna starve to death.
What if I'm like my
Don't
first
have
guy?
kids.
My first guy here gets 1,000 bushels. So if you don't get 1,000 bushels, you're not gonna get paid.
Ooh.
I would
So
love to.
if I get 950 bushels, you're not paying me a dime.
You're not gonna get paid.
Then I'm not working. Forget it, because there's nothing guaranteed in it for me. There's no incentive to work at all.
Then there's
Because
another
you're
line
still
item.
gonna keep that
No,
950
you
bushels.
pay a minimum wage, and then you
But
get
then-
every 100
Provide a
bushels,
bonus.
you
Yeah.
get like
Yeah.
commission.
Yeah, it's like
Commission.
So now you're getting into business management stuff. Back to econ, Andrew.
I'm gonna.
So if you continued to hire like 7, 8, 9, 10 people, would the curve go back down then? Because like if you're falling to 6, it would be another 3,000.
No, but your economic profit and your accounting profit would diminish incredibly. We don't even go there because that's so colossally stupid.
Okay, I was just.
I love that Andrew.
Now, I'm not calling you stupid. I'm saying that we don't even graph that out because no one would do it.
Okay, so it would just flatten out at 3,000. Same thing.
Okay. Farmer Jack has to pay $1,000 a month to rent this land. He's paying $200 an acre to rent the land. Okay, so fixed cost. What kind of cost? Explicit fixed cost. All right. No matter how much weed he grows, he's renting the land, even if the topsoil is all washed away in a Noah's Ark level flood.
Oh,
Okay.
Farmer Jack is like a middleman right now, because he
Yes.
doesn't even, he
Yes.
doesn't own the land.
He is the ultimate manager. All right. So the market wage for a farm worker is $2,000 a month. Ouch, right? So with one employee, Farmer Jack's fixed explicit costs are $3,000 a month. So his costs are related to how much wheat he produces. His cost of land is fixed. His cost of labor increases with each worker he employs, right? So his total cost increases the more workers he gets. So what do we need to know now?
How much you selling the
How much is he going to get per bushel of wheat? Ugh, we better graph this curve out though.
Oh my.
Because now we have a supply curve. No, I can't because you're not in my class. The third-hour teacher has to.
But you're my next hour teacher, and
Then you gotta wait until next hour. I can't. I can't write past at 10:30 for a student who's not in my class. Sorry.
well, then you know where I am when
All right. Marginal cost is the increase in total cost from producing one more unit. So the change in total cost over the change in quantity. Why would she bump the desk? She's completely packed and not even taking notes the last 10 minutes of class. Oh, okay. All right. So, change in total cost divided by the change in quantity. The marginal cost is $2. This is all right. Change in cost $2,000, but the change in quantity is only $800. Marginal cost goes up to $250. Uh-oh, it's getting worse. Even worse. Oh boy. Oh boy. That fifth worker's looking pretty questionable, isn't he? He's got to be. Wow, you got to really like him, or he's got to have like 8 kids.
Or he's probably related to your wife.
Good one.
Thank you.
Good one. He's Farmer Jack's brother-in-law. Yeah. All right.
It's his nephew. He needs a job.
than the supply curve, doesn't it? Marginal costs slope varies inversely to marginal products slope, doesn't it? The flatter marginal product was, the steeper marginal cost is. Can you envision that other curve laid over this one?
What is your marginal cost? It's the way.
Total cost.
Change in total cost over the change in quantity. All right, so why is marginal cost important? Because Farmer Jack needs to know this stuff in order to figure out what he's going to do. Because he's a pretty rational guy, even though he chose to go into farming. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Okay.
Maybe got into farming.
Farmer Jack has to think in the margin, so he has to know marginal cost. And this one, you'd already concluded. If the additional marginal cost is more than what he's going to make for selling that wheat, then he shouldn't hire the worker. So if wheat gets him $7 a bushel, should he hire worker number 5, who's costing him $10? No. Should he hire worker 4? Yeah, because that worker's only costing 5. It's that simple. Here's what makes farming so complex in real life. When you plant your wheat in November, you don't know what the price of wheat is going to be in April. Got to worry about weather. Is there going to be enough moisture in the winter because you can't irrigate? Got to count on some snow cover, some melting, some spring rains. Uh-oh. Did you just say you got to go to church and pray about it? Yeah, economists can't take that into account. Would that be changing the will of God? Delta WG? I don't know. All right, so now we have to go back to fixed and variable costs here. I used this phrase before I defined it for you. I talked about fixed cost with the cost of the land, right? Fixed costs don't change. Not impacted by the output. Told you Jack's got to pay $1,000 a month for that land, regardless of whether it produces 1,000,000 bushels or 0 bushels. Whether a plague of locusts wipes it clean or not, he's paying $1,000 a month. You're liberal today. All right. The cost of the equipment, the combine, the plow, that kind of stuff. He's got interest payments on his loans. Variable costs vary with the quantity produced. Okay. Let's take Jared here. We're going to give Jared 2 mowers and a trimmer. Okay. He has fixed costs associated with his business. He has to license his trailer, he has to license his assumed truck, and vehicle, tow trailer. Okay. His fixed costs. He has to carry insurance. We're gonna assume he carries insurance. Okay. This mower throws a rock through somebody's window. He doesn't want to pay for that. Okay. He's got fixed costs. What are his variable costs? Gas, oil, maintenance. The more he uses his equipment, the more it's going to cost him to maintain it, fill it up, buy new string, replace the wheels on the mower, replace the spark plugs, whatever, air filters, all that kind of stuff. The less he uses it, the less that costs him, but he's not making as much money, right? Okay. So for Farmer Jack, his variable cost is his wages. Yes, Austin?
So the cost of the equipment can vary for both fixed and variable? So
No, because it cost him X number of dollars to buy the equipment. I'm talking about maintaining it. The more you use it. So if Farmer Jack had 20 acres, his maintenance costs would be higher than on 5 acres. Just like, how often do you have to get an oil change? Every 3,000 miles or every 3,000 miles or, right? And if you hardly ever drive, I get an oil change like every 7 months. Because I don't drive 3,000 miles. My car's 2.5 years old and I just hit 10,000 miles. Where do I go? I go from the doghouse here and back again. Come on. I go to see Dad. All right. Another example of variable costs. Seed 1 year versus the next. Pesticides. Maybe there was a new tax produced, and so it's going to cost him more one month over another. Right? Cost of irrigation, water bills change, electric bills change.
Can you like write something like the water bills and stuff off?
Well, yeah, but we're not talking about that. That's taxation and accounting. We're talking about economics. All right. So your total cost is your fixed cost plus your variable costs. And we're going to wait to start example 2 tomorrow. We got halfway through that chapter, folks.